Welcome everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to our first webinar of the year here at Simpson. We hope you had a great holiday and started the new year 2023 with some ambitious pricing goals. In this live webinar today, we want to explain you everything about the value of a pricing engine for B2B and B2C. And the coming 45 minutes, we are completely live on LinkedIn and YouTube. So it also means that if you have any questions or if you want to participate in our polls, that you can do that via the chat on LinkedIn. I'm here together with my colleague Vincent Geelink, which I will introduce you later. And once again, it's an interactive webinar, so we would like to have your opinion or answers on some polls. And let's start with the first one. So to kick off this webinar, we are really interested in what is currently your main resource to create your prices. Is that one, your ERP? Is that two, your web shop? Option three, your Excel or spreadsheets? Or option four, a combination of Excel, business intelligence tooling, your ERP, scraping tools, but also ad hoc information from the stakeholders. And five is that pricing software or very organized input from the stakeholders in the organization. There's only one answer possible, and you can do that in the chat in LinkedIn. So please do the answer that is most suitable or applicable to your situation. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. With some delay, the answers will pop up here in our chat so we can see them. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. We are very curious. You see some 2s here and 3s. Some 4s. Yeah, looks to be very diverse audience today. Okay, great. Thanks for participating. We have 2 more polls to kick off this webinar. The next poll is how many times do you do it? So how many times do you change your prices a year? Is that half a year, yearly? Is that quarterly, so 4 times a year? Is that monthly, weekly, or daily or more? So what's your frequency to change your prices? A, B, C, D, or E? Thanks for that. And we have also a follow-up poll. This is really the last poll. Sorry, there was a little bit of a technical issue. And that's actually how long does it take for you to create new prices? Is that less than 1 hour? Option 1. Between 1 to 5 hours, a price change. Option 2, between 5 to 20 hours, a price change. Option 3. Or option 4, it's actually taken me 1 FTE. So there's 1 full-time employed employee managing the prices, or 5 even more. Again, we are very curious, and in the next slide, we will discuss why we ask you these questions. So last opportunity, last time we ask you this poll: 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. What is most applicable to your situation? Okay, thanks a lot for filling in your answers. If we go to the next slide, we explain you why we asked this for you, to give you a little bit more insights in what could be the potential value for your organization. And we've made this matrix. And the higher the time investment and also the higher the frequency of price changes, the higher the value you will have with a price engine. So, for example, if you are a company that changes their prices weekly and you spend per week 10 hours to update your prices with all the variables that are relevant, there is a lot of value in automating this process compared to a company that does change their prices every 6 months and it costs them 2 hours. So the business case is depending on how much time you can save, but also the repeatable process of the frequency of price changes. And also, if you don't have, even though if you only cost you 1 hour, but if you need to change your prices every day, there's still a medium to high value for a price engine. As well, if you change your prices once a quarter, but you also spend like 2 to 3 weeks once a quarter to change your prices. So I think there's not a lot of value when you change your prices once a year and you only spend a couple of hours. Then the price engine is probably getting a lower value for you as an organization. So thanks for participating in this interactive start. We will now go to the content about why you need a price engine. But the best answer for all these questions we had before is not a good or wrong. So it really depends how often you need to change your prices on the market conditions and also on your organizations. If you are in a very dynamic market or in a market that's very competitive, it's often required to change your prices more often. And if you are in a market that's very stable, which a lot of markets are not nowadays, but then you don't need to change your prices every day or every week. So there's no good or wrong in the answers you had in the past questions. Speaking today in this webinar, my name is Arjen Oosthoek, co-founder of Simpson, and next to me is Vincent Gelink, director of Simpson. And in the next chapter, he will tell everything about what is the value of a pricing engine. But today we have an agenda for this coming 45 minutes. We will start with why you're missing growth potential with the traditional way of pricing. Then we tell you about what could be the potential value of your organization while applying a pricing engine or starting to use a pricing engine. In chapter 3, we take a dive in, how does a pricing process actually look like in different kinds of organizations, small, medium, or enterprises. And in chapter 4, we explain you how technology can upgrade your pricing nowadays. We hear a lot about AI, machine learning, and smart software tooling, but in this part, we tell more about how it can upgrade your pricing. And last but not least, we have, after all these talks, we have a lot of time available to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, you can ask them in the meantime in the LinkedIn chat. So don't hesitate to do that. We are looking forward to answer them. So the title of this webinar is why you should stop using the markup pricing and spreadsheet pricing. If you're using a markup pricing, it's more often based upon a cost plus a margin, and that's often very stable and static. And we believe today's circumstances in the economy are very dynamic. We see a lot of competition in every sectors. We see that a lot of volatility in cost prices, but also other factors could influence your pricing decisions. For example, the logistic challenges that can affect your stock positions, your inventory levels, but also other drivers in your pricing process that could lead that static process. So changing your prices once a quarter or once a month is not enough to beat the competition. And if we dive into a particular or regular pricing process in organizations, we see that the pricing is done a lot by ERPs or spreadsheets. And then you have the basic, the starting point is a base price of, for example, €1,000 of a particular product. And a particular product that has 4 types of variants, A, B, C, or D. And every variant could have a markup or a markdown to come to a list price. And then you have your customer dimension. For B2B company, we could have different customer segments, and every customer segments could have a different discount to, in the end, lead to a net price, what will be communicated on the invoice. So that's the typical process of a B2B company coming from the base price to the net price. And this static process has certain limitations. For example, that The number of factors can be included is very limited. So here we see the variance, we see the customer sizes, the customer segmentations, but it's really hard to add more variance like we discuss in the next slides. And it's also hard to optimize your prices. And I think especially this year, when the focus will be more on margin optimization, since the inflation is very high and it has a pressure on margins, it's really hard with the static process to optimize your margin. And on the other hand, it's hard to analyze, okay, what is actually the customer behavior? It's difficult to integrate that into your pricing process. So this is more an overview how a static process could occur in your organization today. If we go to the next slide, we also give you more insights in the value of a pricing engine, and therefore you can implement a more dynamic pricing process. So here we visualized it with our 3D artist. That dynamic process could move up and down based upon the variables you have included in the pricing process. And yeah, this is why you can start with more dynamic prices, but also have your prices changed with a click on a button. So to be more dynamic and to also to add more situations. So as you could remember of the past slide, we discussed the product and the customer dimension, but with a pricing engine, we can add more situations. For example, seasonality, we have 4 seasons in the year, and you could have different product preferences per season. This is what we can include in a pricing engine. Moreover, we can include competition. We have a lot of possibilities in a pricing engine where you can include different sources from market data, but also inventory levels. So what happens if your product has a certain or achieve a certain limit for your inventory, for your stock level, and then it needs to have a discount or a markup in order to optimize your margin, optimize your revenue. And the same example for a situation is to implement a price sensitivity score. These are all examples of situation you can include to make your prices more dynamic, but also to have a better representation of how your current pricing process looks like in your organization, to be more dynamic, but also to optimize your prices based upon the human processes and the human judgment in your organization. So these are examples of the value of a pricing engine, but my colleague Vincent will elaborate more on this to explain what is the differences between the traditional and the new way of pricing.
Yes, thanks for that introduction, Arjen. Very great. I would like to elaborate, as Arjen already said, on the traditional way of pricing and also the new way of pricing. In the traditional way of pricing, what we see here on the left side of the sheet, we see that a lot of these points that are mentioned here as gut feeling, single price strategy, and slow price adjustments, that all these different elements make sure that the agility towards your price movement in your organization in the dynamic environment that we are dealing with today is becoming a challenge more and more and more. So in the new way of pricing, what we would like to achieve, or the desired outcome, is that we can use data to make fact-driven decisions, right? So the data drives actually the organization towards those points that are relevant in the market. And AI is becoming a huge part of it, because it helps us in a kind of technology way to do analysis and computations that we as humans, I think it's quite difficult to execute it by one person. In the new way of pricing, we also like to combine pricing strategies. As we see in markets and also in the developments and the measurements that we do now, is that, for instance, with seasonality products, you maybe want to apply a price elasticity towards products that are running in certain seasons with great sales volume, but in the other months when the sales volume is a bit down, price elasticity could be a strategy that's not really applicable, and you would really want to work with. Maybe a cost-based plus strategy where you can play a bit with the margins to see how you can push your sales in those other months. Furthermore, we see that, of course, the dynamic time and the real-time price adjustments and getting insights in what is happening in your market all contributes to the next one. What is a focus on hyper learning? So combining your domain knowledge with technology to increase the speed of learning within your organization. And all these different elements help you to focus towards the position in the future that you want to have as an organization, instead of focusing on the current state of affairs and preventing errors from happening. Focus your complete vision towards the future and make sure you execute strategies to, for instance, achieve a certain margin on your EBITDA that you have set. So to give us some benefits for using a pricing engine. So we mentioned 6 in this one. The first one is, of course, that you are able to automate your prices. So what we now still often see is that there's still a lot of manual work in setting prices, and organizations really could benefit of automating the basic price principles within their organization and the price settings that are set. Furthermore, we see that a pricing engine, because it's all data in, and if you automate the data flows that are running through a organization, the chance that an error occurs or that you make a wrong computation is reduced to a high extent, right? So reducing the errors within your organization is also a big benefit of automating your price process through price engine. Furthermore, because you are managing a lot of prices within your tool, you can better stay in control. The simplicity and the way how price strategies are built are much more in a one overview. So it helps you also to control the organization instead of having multiple price lists and multiple calculations and multiple persons who are responsible. It now helps you to aggregate the data on a more higher perspective, and that helps you to keep control of your data and your price processes within your organization. Of course, one of the other most important elements that is also possible is that you can prepare for optimization. So in a system, you are able to build strategies in advance and assign product or product groups to strategies once that strategy becomes valid for a certain period in time. So the preparation of optimization really helps to make steps towards desired KPIs that you have set or that you want to achieve with your organization. The other benefit that we can set is that there is a knowledge assurance. So by building these price strategies within a system, there's actually already kind of log on how price should be executed per product group or per category that you are running within your organization. So instead that if one person leaves the company who was always responsible for the pricing, once such a person leaves the organization, that knowledge is gone as well. But if you build these strategies within a pricing strategy builders, as any system can supply you with, then you have also fetched that knowledge somewhere in your organization and can be used on a later moment again. And finally, of course, we collect the historical data to learn about trends and movements in the market, that if we see similar periods in time, that we can do analysis how that has benefited the organization before and how we can utilize that in a new situation again. So then we move towards how does this pricing engine function within an organization? Because we are all talking about technical applications here, it's good to know how it fits within an organization and how it could interact with the architecture that you maybe have already in place or that you want to build. So a tooling that is based on the MAG architecture could fit very easily within your organization. So the MAG architecture stands for microservices, API first, cloud native, and headless, but means as much that all these elements make sure that you have an easy connection of the application towards the already existing architecture that you have within the organization. And once you are done with the application, it's always easy to let it go and move on to the next step. So if we visualize it more towards a perspective that we on the business level can easily understand is that it looks a bit like this. So on the bottom level, you see kind of the microservices. So we have different applications within an organization where information is located, right? So we have, for instance, the customer side. This can be a customer relationship management system that you have. You can have an ERP system for orders and products where stuff is stored. And for instance, you can have a pricing tool that combines also the information of these other applications that are already in place. By making computation and using the data and executing the strategies that are combined with those, we can present the new calculated prices on different locations within a organization. So for instance, on a website, or maybe you have a mobile application where you want to push the content towards, you can have socials or even your marketplace or web shops that you have running. So in this way, this architecture can really easily connect with your organization and give the calculated and new information back to different sources where you are active online. So, of course, what we want to know is if we start using a pricing engine, what is then the impact on our organization? And what we have seen till this point, and what out of measurements have seen is that 80 to 90% of the manual repetitive tasks are eliminated once using a pricing engine, and that really open up time to explore new opportunities, but also to increase the complexity of your pricing strategies, and also evolve as an organization to start developing and focusing on new possibilities that you can utilize towards the future. So, in terms of what kind of impact can a pricing engine make on your organization? So, what do we need to think about in price movements? What you can achieve. So, if we look at one of the biggest organizations who is selling in the B2C environment, as we all know, that is Amazon. Amazon does a lot of dynamic pricing within their organization using also an automated pricing engine. And in this pricing engine, if we look at the data that we have subtracted from some source, we see that they can do around 2 to 2.5 million, in some cases 3 million different price movements on a day on their whole assortment. So this is really gigantic, right? In terms of execution that is taking place and the hypothesis testing, A/B testing on pricing around products that you are selling in the market, this is really next level in setting prices. So just to make sure that we have a good understanding that price changes and dynamic pricing and being able to have that agility in our organization is growing, and the amount of price changes is happening more often than most people are aware of. But I think this one gives a good indication in that is still that's a really valid point to take in consideration. Because if you start using a pricing engine, what could it benefit to you, right? So if you have just a pricing engine that is not of course the global scale, but just for instance in a few countries and on your company's own level, then with a pricing engine you are already able to make 1.5 million price changes a day, and that already contributes a lot, of course, to your organization to really fetch the margin that you want to achieve, or at least explore if these possibilities are there. I would say that in every organization, and we move to that topic in a bit, but in every organization, there's a different need in price changes. But what you always want to be aware of is if these calculations are done on your price, on your products, and on the service that you are selling, it is always good to know what the ideal price point could be and what you want to test. Even though if you don't use those price points directly, knowing and having the insight to move in a certain direction can really help you steer the organization towards KPIs where you weren't active in an earlier stage. So it really helps the development organization and being in charge of your process. So now we are going to move to the third topic of this webinar, and that is what does the pricing process look like? And then we would like to zoom in organization types and how the complexity is increasing over these levels. So out of the experience that we now have with the different companies that we have onboarded on our tool, at least, is that we see that if we work with small companies, there's always one or two people involved in setting the prices. So sometimes it's only the entrepreneur who is responsible actually for a lot of aspects of the organization, and pricing is one of them. And in some cases, we see that there are multiple entrepreneurs and that they carry this tasks together. And then we see that there's someone on the financial side or more on the organizational side, and one is more the entrepreneurial side. And in this way, they have communication together about setting the prices, and it's mostly done based on a discussion and then a kind of value perception that they have of their product or service into the market. If we then move towards the next step, so they have survived the small company setting and they move towards a more medium-sized company, then we already see that the number of people that are involved in the pricing process is increasing rapidly, because as you can see, there's 100% growth in what we have experienced and who is responsible for pricing. So in medium companies, we already often see that we are dealing with 4 different stakeholders. In medium companies, we see that there is a pricing analyst or a pricing manager in service, or it can also be that it is a e-commerce manager, or even just someone who is responsible commercially for some activities. Furthermore, we see that there's always some involvement of the financial department, someone of IT, of course, for the integration of systems that are used to set prices. And because there's always, in these cases, also some kind of insight of inbound sales or sometimes account managers, these are also being included in decisions around the price process. And in this case, we are already managing different influence and perspective in setting prices that are best for the organization. Yeah, and finally, of course, then we move towards the biggest kind, and that's then enterprise levels. And what we see here in the discussions that we have is that we are dealing with departments. And the complexity in dealing with these levels of stakeholders is that the number of perspectives that we have to deal with to come up with certain price directions is increased, right? It becomes more and more difficult to steer based on gut feeling or discussions prices towards a direction that we feel comfortable with setting in our organization. So this is really the position where a pricing tool also shows true value, because by collecting data and summarizing data and make it insightful to use in making these decisions, a pricing tool helps to unify these different departments and persons who are involved in the pricing process to start making directions that are choices in a direction that they all feel comfortable with. And this is also what we will then visualize, of course, in this chart, what you see here. So on the left side, you see the small, medium, and large enterprises. So of course, pricing complexity already increases with the size of the company, but also the elements that we need to take into account in the pricing process become more complex when a company starts growing. And elements, and we only mentioned 3 here, but there are multiple dimensions that we can take into account, and we will zoom in on those dimensions in a bit. But we mentioned 3 here. So for instance, you have to consider your market condition, you have to know how your competitive field is looking like and what they are doing with the prices. You have to have a good idea about your costs, your cost structure, and the expected fluctuations maybe in costs that are coming up, and all these different elements has to be taken into consideration by setting your prices on the right level. Make sure that your company makes healthy margins. All right, just to snap out the presentation a bit, as a quick poll, just to get an idea how it is in your organization. Maybe you would like to answer the next question. So how many people are involved in your pricing process? Please give us a 1 if it is just and only you who is doing the pricing process. Give us a number 2 if it's the director and someone else, or that you are with 2 people in the pricing process. Give us a 3 if you are with persons between 3 and 5, and please send in a 4 if you are doing the pricing process with more than 5 employees. Yeah, we see a few numbers coming in. So most ones are between 2 and 3. Sometimes we see a 4. Yes. All right. Another 4. And another 4. Nice. Yeah. So we already see in the answers that are coming in that we see that multiple persons are involved in the pricing process, also confirming that pricing processes is also managing multiple stakeholders, and data can be a real good driver to help to unify these stakeholders towards the direction they all feel comfortable with, and helping the organization on the trajectory of healthy margins. All right. Then we move to the next slide. And the next slide is that we zoom in a bit on the technology side. So what is actually happening in this technology setup that helps companies in a pricing engine to utilize an engine as such, but also the data that a pricing engine consumes. So if we look in the past towards the situation that we have now, and I think we all experience it and we read it in newspapers all the time, is that there's an exponential growth in the use of different technologies that are available today for companies that want to utilize data. So in the beginning of time, we saw that there was a lot of negotiation and just discussions amongst us as humans to determine what is the ideal price position, right? And it was the calculation was more in discussion than it really was a calculation. But over time, we developed new technologies and machines to help us assess different situations and come up with new prices. And that is what this graph is also representing. So over time, we now see that, yeah, we have so much abilities to analyze data, use data, and make computations for price settings. That this time where we live in today, that it is going quicker and quicker, and it's becoming more dynamic. So really in the terms of capabilities a company should have to survive this rapid development, I think data and the use of data and being able to utilize it is becoming more increased important. So this is a kind of a visualization on how data then is used within a company. So there are different dimensions, of course, that are around products and prices and services to set in the market. And all these different price points have a kind of interdependency towards one another, right? So we can have dimensions of where a product is placed. Is it serving high-end, mid-market, or maybe the low end of the market? But you also want to know things about your competition. So where is your product placed based on that level? But we also want to know internal data. So when are you selling these products? In which regions are you selling these products? What was the margin objective of the product? So all these dimensions are interconnected and are stored in different systems. And what we want to achieve with a pricing engine is that all these data points are used and set, and that we can determine how we utilize this data to help the organization bringing in new perspective and setting prices on new levels. So once this data is collected, then of course it needs to be processed, and the visualization that you see here is how data processing can be executed. So on the left side of this image, you see three different sources of data that come in through a API. So the API is the one who's collecting the data out of these three different sources. So we have internal data that's mostly coming out of ERP system or CRM systems. We have external data. This can be things as what is the economical trend that we are running on? Is there any seasonality in your products? Or is there any certain special event that was going on why sales have to increase? But you have to be aware of these different data points. So these are collected through the external system. Finally, of course, an analysis on the competitor data that is available or is not available, depending on, of course, the market that you are active in. Once all this data is collected, it is pushed into the AI, and the AI is able to build a data model on top of these different elements. And the model that is built within the AI is validated again and again and again with each new sales cycle that is taking place within your organization. The output of the AI is then always running through a quality indicator that determines if the calculations has been done good enough. And finally, if that's the case, it's pushed through the API and presented to the user who can then consume, for instance, data insights or a complete calculated price list, or even other insights that they want to do, or even build scenarios to use the data and to get an idea how a change of perspective could lead to change towards the future. And I think this is a real nice way to visualize in how it could work for any organization. And then I would like to give the floor back to Arjen, who is going to speak a bit more on our
Yes, thank you, Vincent. And of course, the new technology, what Vincent explains, offers us an opportunity to make the pricing process more intelligent. But we also believe that the speed of learning can be your new competitive advantage in these ages of technology. In the past, businesses could succeed with, for example, economies of scale, IP, or strong vision. Of course, it is still important, but we believe this is not enough to outsmart the competition today. And therefore, our statement is that the speed of learning can be your new competitive advantage. And we do this with a concept we developed. It's called hyperlearning, which offers you the right balance between human learning and machine learning to increase the organizational learning as a whole. And on the next slide, you see a matrix that was originally created by MIT professor Paul Schumacher, and where he actually gives more information about how you can make the optimal judgments between the right combination between humans and computers to make superior decisions and judgments. So you see here in this matrix, you see 4 quadrants. On one hand, you see the task, if the task is highly unique or familiar. And on the other axis, you see what is the data density of these tasks. If tasks are really familiar and there's a lot of data, the computers are always stronger. So in a lot of circumstances we discussed today, you see that if the pricing process is very repeatable and has a lot of data coming from the ERP system or any other systems you use in your process, a pricing engine, you can use that to automate a lot of tasks. But if you're using more highly unique tasks in your pricing, for example, a new customer that comes in where you need to do a negotiation, there the human or the pricing expert will always win. But often in pricing, it's a combination. Maybe 60 or 70% is a repeatable process, but there are situations in your pricing process which are not repeatable. And that's why I believe in this combination between humans and computers to make superior judgments and decisions in your pricing. And for every company that can be unique, and that's why you could develop your unique or your customized pricing model. But the role of a human can be to discover or to detect new drivers which could be integrated to your next pricing algorithm, but also to have a critical evaluation of what will be the predictions of the algorithm. And therefore, by applying that, you increase the human learning because he learns how the computer learns and what are the outcomes of the computer. But on the other hand, the computer always also learns from the feedback of the humans. And that's what we call hyperlearning. You learn actually in a faster pace than before because you increase these number of learning cycles from the computer, from the human, but also as an organization. And that's how we can make the learning part a new competitive advantage in your company. And as Vincent already explained in the example of Amazon actually does the same. And they embraces the culture of experimentation and of learning. And that's why they could speed up in the learning process and actually have a better model than their competitors. Now we move on to the learnings of our implementations of a pricing engine. This is very high level and some could be cliches, but we really want to emphasize on some of the learnings. One big learning is always start with a good business case. As we started in the beginning with the matrix of time investment and frequency, this could also be a good business case to start with, to ask yourself, okay, how many hours or days do I really spend to make a price change? And what is also the most desired outcome? And how many times do I want to do that? What is the frequency of these price changes to have a leading position in my market. And that's a good starting point for defining your business case and defining the value a pricing engine could add. And when you've decided that really as step one, then you can start with collecting the right people to implement it. Our learning is that you can better start with most analytical people in your organization to kick off the first test with a price engine. If you want to start with that with a price engine, it requires a good overview of the pricing process. It also requires a good understanding of the data. Where can these data be found? What is the quality of the data? And how can they be interpreted? So people that have analytical skills in your organization are really beneficial in this process. The next learning is, dream big, start small. I think when companies are starting with a pricing engine, probably they want to have the same price engine as, for example, on Amazon or any other big player. But it's always good to be realistic and to start small with a good defined scope. And a good defined scope could be a certain focus of your assortment or a certain customer group, or a country that is more into experimentation with different prices, or is more further in the digitalization of the processes. That's really up to your organization. But if it's successful in this smaller part of the scope, then we can scale it up more easily. And then you have also the buy-in from the organization to scale up the price engine. The last learning, it's also more of a cliche, but fail fast, learn fast. The way to Rome was also not built in one day. So also implementing a pricing engine and moving from a good feeling or emotional driven pricing process to a data driven pricing process. It is a process itself. But when you learn fast and you also embrace in your organization and a culture of experimenting and sharing these learnings, it will be more successful in the future. So these are some learnings. Of course, we have more, but we only share 4 in this slide. But if you want to know more of our learnings, we are happy to share them in the next webinar or in a face-to-face meeting. I think this is the honor for Vincent. If you have a personalized demo, Vincent, can you take it over?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I just got the message that my voice was not heard. But for if you want to have a demo, then you can use the LinkedIn QR code that you see here, and we can connect on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure I will follow up there with you to make a personalized appointment on your demo. For a demo, and furthermore, we can also use the link from the website down below. Just go to simpson.com/demo, and then you can fill in the form, and we will follow up that one and make sure that we book in a demo for you. If you have any questions left, then we would invite you to post those questions in the chat so we can address them, and hopefully we can answer the questions and make sure that we clear some question marks still again during this webinar.
We see a question here from Thomas coming in the chat. Are the pricing engines compatible with all ERP systems and vendor platforms? Thank you, Thomas, for asking these questions. Vincent, would you like to
Yes,
answer this question?
sure. Yeah, of course, because it's API driven, as I tried to explain with the MAG architecture. So what we normally would do is connect the API to any ERP system that is out there and make sure that we can collect the data. Until this point, we didn't come across a ERP system or other system that wasn't able to connect before setup. So yeah. Uh,
Okay, let's see. We had some technical issues here. We will wait for a few seconds. See you, Raymond. Thanks for webinar. Yeah, are there any other questions, burning questions you would like to get an answer on? Question from Victor.
We're not e-commerce the best of breed out of the market and position your company to be a winner. I would say that is always the objective because it gives both the elements that benefit where your organization is most in need of, and it is also easy to cut loose application and move towards other ones. So I would say towards the future, I would say the hybrid solutions that are out there and the ability. I would say if I can give my personal future, I would say that is the direction where we are heading.
We are also a little bit running out of time. We would like to this is visible after the webinar. Yeah, for right now, we want to thank you for your or to see you in the next webinar.